Hello everyone, this is Daniel. We are continuing with our video log series. Just a quick introduction to those who haven't seen the first one. This basically is a quick introduction to some of the components of the verbal section in GRE. Today, this is our second video. We are going to cater to sentence equivalence. Sentence equivalence, which is other part of the verbal section alongside comprehension and sentence completion. Now, sentence equivalence is roughly similar to sentence completion. And a lot of what we talked about in sentence completion is also going to apply to sentence equivalence. Where the two are different in format is simply the fact that in sentence equivalence, what you have to do is, firstly you have to choose two options, not one. In sentence completion, you have 5 options, you have to choose one. In sentence equivalence, you have 5 options and you have to choose 2 of them. Either you have 5 or 6, it varies. Mostly you have 6 options, but you have to choose 2 of them. Now, this is a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it gives you more information, it gives you more data. What you need to understand is the actual theme of sentence equivalence is to create 2 equivalent sentences. This is where it is different from sentence completion. So here we are not simply looking for what fits best within the sentence, but we are also looking for another word which, if we roughly substitute it for the first word, creates 2 equal sentences. By 2 equal sentences, I mean that thematically they are the same. Now this is good because it gives us more information. If you know one of the words, it makes it a lot easier to figure out the other word. Where it is difficult is precisely because now you have to not make one but 2 choices. So even if you know one half and don't know the other, you still lose all the points that you get. Remember, in GRE there are no half scores. Either you get it right and you get all the points, or you get it wrong and you get nothing. Now, coming back to sentence equivalence, the thing, as I said, that you need to remember is all the things that we talked about in sentence completion. We talked about particularly 2 things. We talked about the clue and we talked about the pivot. Both of these also apply to sentence equivalence. But what you need to figure out in this instance is the 2 sentences that we are creating need to be equivalent. So the one thing that we need to know, again, I cannot stress this more because I also spoke about this in our last video, is vocabulary. Vocabulary, which is the third component of both of these questions. If you do not know the word or you do not know the synonym of it, there's no point going through all of this. I would repeat myself again. The reason we are looking at the clue and the pivot is so that we can figure out our own word for the blank, which, as I said, you have to supply by yourself. It is only then that you substitute this word for the options given. Now, coming back to vocabulary, because vocabulary now becomes far more important in sentence equivalence than it was even in sentence completion, because you don't simply need a single word which needs to be accurate, you need 2 words. Where this is good for students is it allows you to start remembering synonyms, and that is a very good way of memorizing words. Remember again, with GRE, you don't actually need to know the word, you just need to know the whereabouts of the word. So if you have some inkling of what the word is, it goes a long way, because what we are doing in both of these questions, sentence completion and sentence equivalence, we are using a process that we call the process of elimination. We are eliminating all the choices. That gives us far better probability of getting it right. So one hint that I want to give about vocabulary is, as I've mentioned earlier, you guys are maintaining a journal or somewhere where you are keeping track of all the words that you come across. But the right way of doing it is, rather than memorizing a vocabulary in the sense you memorize the word and what it means, I would much rather you memorize words and their synonyms. So for instance, the word poor or poverty. Now this is very simple. Virtually all of you will understand this thing. But what you would not know is the word penury. The word penury means extreme poverty, or the word, for instance, indigent. Indigent also refers to someone who is extremely poor. What you need to do when you are maintaining a vocabulary list is, rather than writing the definition of penury, you club these 3 words together into one. This way, it is a lot easier to memorize words, and you can also grow on your vocabulary. So from poor comes poverty, comes indigent, comes penury, and every other word which talks about somebody being poor or worse off can be included in this list, and this is a very good way of actually memorizing words. Now the point is, every word has its own connotations, and this is where sentence completion or sentence equivalence, is very good, because you don't actually need to know all of it. I mean, the context does help, but sentence equivalence is ultimately about creating two sentences which are roughly equal. Now, one thing that we need to know is what usually happens is in a sentence equivalence question, as I said, you would have 6 options. Now, out of these 6 options, if you are clever enough, you would realize that of the 6, you would have 2 synonyms and the rest would be useless, which means even prior to reading the question, what you can very well do is look at the options and start figuring out which 2 words are similar in meaning or are close to one another. This way you can virtually eliminate all else. Now what usually happens in GRE is you have sets of 2. So either you would have 2 sets of synonyms. So you would have penury and indigent, right? And you would have, let's say, rich, and let's just to make it easy, someone who's well off, or say riches and luxury. Now we understand that these words are not the same, but they roughly follow a similar connotation. So every time you're looking at a sentence equivalence questions, what you can easily identify is there are 2 sets of synonyms and 2 sets of irrelevant words. This makes it a lot easier to attempt sentence equivalence. In a traditional GRE verbal section, you would come across 5 to 6 sentence equivalents. And as I said, our target is to solve a question in a minute. Under a minute, if it's taking more than a minute, make a guess, move on, because you don't want to waste your time. Again, if you don't know the words, it's not going to matter. Even if you know, say for instance, penury, but you are not at all clear what the word indigent means, there's no way you can make this connection, because the words, again, they are meant to confuse you. Now, I think this is enough. Vocabulary